All right, it is 7:04. I am a woman of my word, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. People are still going to be pouring in, and that is totally fine. I'm going to start with introducing myself. Hi, everyone. My name is Allie. I am the general manager of the Silver Room in Hyde Park, Chicago. And this is our series of author talks and conversations with the amazing people that we have in this room today. So I'm going to start with introducing Tanika Johnson, who will be moderating most of the conversation. Tanika is a photographer, social justice artist, and lifelong resident of Chicago's South Side neighborhood of Inglewood. She is also the co-founder of two community-based organizations, Inglewood Art Collective and Resident Association of Greater Inglewood, seek to reframe the narrative of Southside communities and mobilize people and resources for positive change. On top of that, Tanika's also done amazing work with her folded map project. I could go into a whole Zoom talk about that. So that's a separate thing.
Oh, you're so sweet.
Amazing and revolutionary, and we are so here for it. So thank you for being here to help moderate the conversation. And then the two authors we have with us today are Lesleigh Honore, and I'm going to start with a little bio about her. Lesleigh is a Black Sican poet, artivist, and author of Fist and Fire, a collection of powerful, unflinching poems that confront issues of social justice through the lens of real human lives and voices and dive into the flames of love within the context of a relationship. Ooh, that is a mouthful, but like a beautiful mouthful. Oh, love it, love it. Born and raised in California, been in Chicago since '99 and loving it here ever since. Lesleigh also does amazing things. I'm excited to get this conversation going. And last but not least, we have Charlene Carruthers, who is Black queer feminist community organizer and writer for over 15 years of experience in racial justice, feminist, and youth leadership development movement work. As the founding national director of BYP 100, she has worked alongside hundreds of young Black activists to build a national base of activist member-led organizations of Black 18 to 35-year-olds dedicating to create justice and freedom for all Black people. That's amazing. That is powerful. So we have a room full of dope people, and we are going to be excited to get the conversation going. I did want to mention before we get this conversation started, both of their books are available at the Silver Room in Hyde Park. I think someone is dropping the link, and they are available online too. If you're local in Chicago, it's free local delivery. We also ship internationally. The Silver Room's been around since 1997. Eric Williams, you'll see his name on a couple of different icons here, but he started the Silver Room as any person would. It was like an amazing, amazing community built space that has just transformed over the years. And I think books has been our latest add to the store, and it's a really dope feature that I'm really proud to have at the store. So thank you, Eric, for again making all of this possible. And then I'm gonna pass the mic over to Tanika.
Thank you. Well, welcome everybody. I am so happy to be here to talk to my friend Lesleigh and to fangirl with Charlene.
Yes, all the fangirling.
Yes. So before we, get started, because really this is not only a conversation, but it's me wanting to pick your brains because you all are both published authors. And it's something that I have been dancing with personally, and I'm going to be just all up in your business about that process. But first, I just want to find out, how are you all doing? We had to reschedule the talk because of everything that you experienced with COVID, Lesleigh, and I just wanted to take some time to check in with you and also tell you how just happy I am you recovered well, and for you to be joining us after experiencing all of that. So I do just want to acknowledge that, and to just say I'm happy to have you here. And if you would like to just talk about, you know, how you're doing now.
I am booked, busy, and blessed. But so it was scary. My whole house had it. So I'm a single mom. My eldest came home first with some symptoms, and then we're like, and we had a really good plan. And when I say we, my daughter, my daughter, Sage, who's 20, it was her plan, like early on in quarantine. We're like, if somebody gets it, we should have a plan on how we quarantine at home. So we had already had a plan about what room, what floor, how we were going to move around. And so that went into effect immediately. And then I got symptomatic. And so when we went and got tested, we were both positive. And then we quarantined. And for about a week, my 17-year-old son and my 12-year-old daughters, they lived downstairs. We lived upstairs, and they would just bring us food on the stairs. I mean, it was a testament to good planning and good family stuff. And then they got symptomatic, and we got them tested, and we were super careful for the week that we were quarantining away from each other. And then when we found out that they were positive too, we just went downstairs and stood in front of them without a mask on. And it took them a second. And then my son Bubby, he was like, "Damn." That we found some humor in it, but it was not the flu. It was horrible. It was really, really horrible. I had to have some real conversations that we had danced around before, but it was like calling people who I already identified to take care of my kids if something happened to me. It was like, hey, I'm doing not, sounding the alarm, but putting you on warning. We don't know where this may turn. But remember when you said, and we put it in paper and we notarized it, this may happen, having the conversations with my kids about where important stuff was, where passwords were, who to call at work. It was real, for lack of a better word. And it was not light, the adage was, so I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. I would wish what I went through on my very worst enemy, people that I hate.
Because it was that,
by Game of Thrones Arya list that I have in the back of my mind, that I'm like, I'm not wishing ill on you, but if something happens, I'll send you thoughts and prayers. Those people I would absolutely like, here, have this, because
take this little package. Yeah. No.
Yeah, it was bad. So I'm extremely grateful to be on the other side of it. All of us recovered well, but it was scary. I lost taste and smell, and how important that is until it's gone. And you're like, I can't even smell my sheets or my shampoo, and it's disorienting. But also having the privilege of having healthcare and having doctors, and how difficult it was, even with that, to get rapid testing, to find out where to go. And it was just a constant reminder of, if it's hard for me with resources, how much harder it is for someone without it. So yeah, it was just a lot. It was just all at once. So I'm so grateful to be on the other side.
No, I'm so happy that you pulled through, and you were able to use that experience to reflect about these important issues, which brings me to Charlene. Like, how are you doing? You have been advocating for Black and marginalized people, and so to have this pandemic, COVID, really lay bare a lot of the things that you built your work and your value system around, to just lay bare. How are you feeling and dealing with everything?
Thank you for that question. And I just also want to say thank you. I'm really grateful and thankful that, Leslie, that you and your family are on the other side of that. And just wish you all continued wellness through everything. So I'm glad we can have this conversation today. For me, it's 2020 really represented a deep year of grief for me. Just varying levels of grief. Some of it I've written about publicly, from personal family loss. I had several family members passed away towards the first quarter of the year, including one person, my uncle, who passed away from COVID-19 complications fairly early on.
Sorry to hear that.
Thank you. And I went to his memorial service, and he was the person who I lived with the second half of my senior year uh, of high school, and yeah, he was a major part in like helping me transition to the next part of my life as a young adult. And I had personal losses, just a bunch of stuff happened in 2020. And then we get to May of 2020, and the world, not even just here, not just me, not just Chicago, but the world witnessed uprising after uprising related to how, in many ways, how Black people are treated globally, and how Black and Brown people continue to live in what Sadia Hartman would call like the afterlife of something. She talks about the afterlife of slavery, and that could be extended the afterlife of colonialism, the afterlife of settler colonialism, and people contending with that, Black, Brown, Indigenous folks all over. And I had pretty much turned to write. We could talk about this a little later, like writing in a different way during that time. And like, I think I got a text message or a call basically saying, girl, you've been called to the front. Go do, because I hadn't been actively organizing. While everybody else was actively organizing during the pandemic, I was mostly just supporting what people had going on. And so come May, I do feel like I was deployed to support like younger, newer organizers, people who were trying to figure out what to do, not just not even in Chicago. Chicago was like support, like it wasn't like, oh, can you help us figure something out? It was like, how can I help? How can I show up and support? There are other places like Minneapolis. I'd been working with the organizers in Minneapolis for the past year before this happened. And when it happened, I was like, whoa, I said I wanted everybody to know about y'all, but I didn't know this was gonna be the thing that led to it. So in this moment, as we're in 2021, I'm deeply reflective. I'm in school, studying again, and I'm also like not actively organizing like I used to. So just figuring out what is my best and highest use. And right now, my best and highest use is to continue to be like a good relative, and to also take the time to study. Because that's what I've been spending a lot of this time doing, is studying. And that's like, as I wade through grief, as I wade through the uncertainty of the triple pandemic of, climate disaster, COVID-19, and, the ongoing assault on Black people's lives.
No, that's powerful. A triple pandemic. I mean, I'm sure we could definitely increase that to be larger. So many.
Of course.
But you definitely hit on the major ones. So I really want to talk about the fact that, not only are you all both like amazing advocates, activists, but you are published authors. So despite all of the other work that you all do, you found it in your whole goals, plans to publish a book. So I want you all to let everyone know, maybe for some of the new people who came in, one, the name of your book and your how you describe it, but also answer for me, why was it important for you all to write and publish a book? You all do advocacy in your professional lives. And Lesleigh, you're a poet. You could just have easily just continued to do spoken word. Charlene, you could have just easily continued to do advocacy by the way that you have done it the past decade. But why was it important for each of you to publish and write a book? Don't forget to tell everybody the title of your book, what it is, and why.
Absolutely.
Why?
So my PR magician is on here too, so I don't want her coming for me. So this is my book, Fist and Fire. She'd be good with me repping now. So mine isn't traditional. I self-published, and I've always done poetry. I think after college and then surviving an abusive marriage, I had maybe a decade where I didn't do poems anymore. I got really quiet. And coming back to poetry is what brought me back to myself and back to center. And it also shifted how I wrote. It was no longer either academic, because I studied English Lit at Xavier. And then I was no longer desiring to do spoken word. I'm not a performance poet. My poetry lives in this space that's in between both of them, that I want it to be really accessible. I don't want to talk about leaves or the color of a flower, although that's revolutionary too. That's just not what I do. And I don't remember stuff. I'm 44, so I always have to read from something, my book, or because it's not going to happen. But
so basically, the memory part is why spoken word did not happen. Okay.
No, ma'am. So publishing came to me through putting my work on social media, and me also not thinking that anything was going to come of that. And a girlfriend said, "Hey, make this post public. I think people would really like to read it." I'm like, I'm going to read poetry on Facebook. And they did. And the first piece that I had went viral was about Taishan Lee, the 9-year-old boy who was killed here. And everybody's focus was his mother buying a car instead of, a 9-year-old boy was just murdered. And we know that the reaction would have been very different if he was white. And then that summer of 2016, we were experiencing what Black and Brown people have always experienced in our community lynching. But we were seeing it in real time because of social media. And I just kept writing about it and posting and, almost like live tweeting, like when something happened, I would try to write about it as quickly as possible. And by the time that summer was over, I had amassed, unfortunately, so much work about us being more than a hashtag, about us being more than a blip, about another police officer being acquitted or not even, arrested and brought to trial. And so that's where Fist and Fire really came from. And then I had some people who encouraged me to do self-publishing. We did a Kickstarter, we raised money. It was a very tough process. It is not an easy process to self-publish. And I'm proud of it. I would prefer never ever to do it again, because it's a lot of hard work, being your own editor, figuring out how layout should look. Like there's so much more to a book after you write the text, like stuff that I never even thought about: paper, font, cover art, how you want to section it off, how it flows, what is intentional, what is not. And then you go through the killing my darlings phase when you're like, this doesn't need to be in here. But I wrote it and I love it. So it's much easier, I think, when you have a team of people who can be a little bit removed from that immediacy of it to help you see the vision outside of being, really deep into it. But I'm proud I did it. It is my baby, and it has brought me places that I never imagined. It has opened doors that I didn't even know existed. I didn't even know that door was there to dream about going through that door. And so now I'm just committed to sticking my foot in that door and making sure somebody else comes through it as well.
Thank you for bringing that up, the doors that it opened, because I definitely want to touch on that later. And then also maybe even have you recite a poem so people can really understand who may not have heard your work or read your work, so that they can get an idea of what your poetry, how it reads and how it can feel on paper. And Charlene, you know, why a book? Why a book? You're already, you know, such an activist and an educator, but why did you decide that publishing a book, I would assume, is maybe an extension of your work, but why?
Yeah, I mean, that has so much to do with it. I remember when I was first learning the craft of community organizing, I would like intentionally, because I'd done campus organizing and even some off-campus community organizing in St. Louis before I ever intentionally went about figuring out or learning about the craft of organizing. And I didn't really have anything to read that was written by somebody who was even Black. And that's like one area, just one identification to maybe look for. There are plenty of biographies and autobiographies about great and amazing people. Like Dr. Barbara Ransby wrote Ella Baker's biography, Assata Shakur's autobiography, Malcolm X and Alex Haley helped him write his. Like those things exist. But Ella Baker didn't write a book, and I'm not comparing myself to Ella Baker, just to be clear, I was using her as an example. Ella Baker nor Fannie Lou Hamer ever wrote a book about how they did what they did. How did you do it? How might other people consider going about this? And I would, if they had, I don't know, this book wouldn't be the same, Unapologetic wouldn't be the same kind of book that it is. And when I started to write it, it actually was going to be more like an organizing manual. That was the initial intention, was to write a how-to. And I landed on here's a more complete story about Black radical, Black feminist, Black LGBTQ organizing. And so that people who read it might be better positioned to come up with more complete solutions in the organizing work that they do. And so Unapologetic is a combination of stories, of some guiding principles, some core questions that anybody could use if you're interested in doing the work necessary for our collective liberation. And I wrote it, because Toni Morrison told us if there is a book that you want to read that has not been written, then you need to write it. Yeah. And so this book didn't exist. And there should be more books, and there have been more books, and there will continue to be more books that are written by younger Black people, younger Black women, younger Black queer, trans folk, all kinds of folk, Black disabled folk, Black undocumented people, all kinds of folks to talk about how we might go about that work of building towards collective liberation, both the work that we can do as individuals, because Grace Lee Boggs, who was a Chinese American organizer and intellectual, who was politicized here in Chicago and organized for decades in Detroit, taught people about the importance of and the necessity for revolution within ourselves as we go about the work of like building revolution out in the world. And so I think that this is one offering. And, when I was thinking about my audience for this book, I was thinking about Black women, period. Black women of varying experiences, Black trans women, Black women who aren't trans, older Black women, younger Black women, Black women who may or may not have ever read anything about organizing, but have done organizing in their lives, Black women of all class status, physical ability, all of those things. The book is there's an audio version of it. There's a Spanish language version of Unapologetic. Wow. And I want to get it translated into other languages. So that's the why for me.
No, thank you for that. And I think you should probably show everybody the book so that they can know just visually. Yes, there it is.
So if you see this, the person who designed the cover actually, it's inspired by the quilting bees, the Black women who do quilting in Alabama. And you can they actually have Etsy shops now. If I'll find a link and pop it in the chat. But there's this legacy of Black women quilting in Alabama, and the person who did the cover, like, got his inspiration from them, and that's
beautiful.
So,
That's
yeah.
beautiful. So we understand who you were thinking of as you were writing this book. But can you both actually speak to kind of what Lesleigh touched on, how publishing the book has opened doors you didn't even know was there? How has the process of publishing and even writing your book impacted you personally in ways? What is a way in which that it has contributed to your growth and evolution?
Ooh, well, it's two things. First, I just wanted to comment on something that Charlene said about who she writes for. And without fail, especially when I'm writing something that's not specifically and obviously directed towards white people and white culture, I always get, not brown girls, all girls, or not just Black moms, all moms. And I it's like,
serious?
Oh, girl, yes. It's like, no, I'm a brown and Black mom with Black children, and that's what I'm writing about. Now, if you want to write about something for you, go be gone. Have your art.
Don't do it.
Go. Blessings. But it is something very powerful to say, this is who I'm writing for. I'm not trying to be inclusive. I'm trying to be specific to people who have been excluded. And if you find something that threads your humanity to our experience and it inspires you to change your behavior or to do introspect, then that is great. That's wonderful. That's what art does. But I'm not writing for you, and that's okay. And just I don't know how else to be, specific with it enough, but I get it a lot. And I was just wondering, if Charlene gets it as well. Like, what about white women organizers? What about y'all? Like,
I go back to Toni Morrison again. I mean, the people would challenge her and question her. And even there's this interview, really famous interview, where she's talking to this white woman, and she gives these examples of this white woman gives these examples of these white men authors and how they were writing, and it's like, why do you only write about Black people? And then Toni Morrison gives this response, which I'm not as dope as Toni Morrison was, but she made it very clear that she could write about Black people, and then people around the world could connect to that. Like, she could write from a place of writing for Black folk. It wasn't that only Black people could buy her books. Like, Toni Morrison's work has been translated in I don't know how many languages, and it has been read all over the world. And she was writing by and for Black people, period. And so I think I can write from my location. And as you're saying, Lesleigh, we could write from our location, and if you find connections there, then let's rock with it. And I absolutely believe that, like, Black folks writing from our location, Black and brown folks, Native folks writing from our various locations, enable many people to connect to what it is that we're doing. For sure.
And so, you talking about that makes me think of this one, and excuse me if I chop it up, but it was so powerful to me when I was watching this documentary about Lorraine Hansberry, and I use this quote even in my medium of photography and multimedia. She said that she writes, basically, that if you write very specifically, very, not even worrying about inclusivity, but the more specific you write, the more universal it will be, because it's dealing with the emotion. It's dealing with the human experience. And so she said that the more specific you are, the more universal it actually can be. And so I hear you all kind of saying sentiments of that. And of course, hearing what the response is from others, but it sounds like you all, understand operating from that space of like specificity and the power of it. And also how people should be able to see themselves in us.
Mm-hmm.
So you talked about the doors that opened, Leslie. Like, what are some of the doors that you didn't foresee opening, or ways in which this publishing this book has contributed to your work, changed your life, or it been an extension of work that you do? How has this book impacted you personally?
Well, having a book being published, whether it's self-publishing or being published by a house and having a literary agent, what it does is it gives you a stamp of approval that white supremacy holds on to really tightly. So it allows you to put an additional, author behind your name, and that opens doors that stay closed to a lot of artists, who have not been published, and allows you to get into space and shake things up a little bit. I walk in a lot of racial ambiguity. And what a lot of people expect for me to talk about is not what I end up talking about. And so that's good times. And I like to use that as much as possible, especially in spaces where I know if it was a woman who was darker than I am, would not even be invited in. So I like to be able to weaponize it and to create space for it and to challenge for it. I would say that what it's done is by merging my profession and my passions. So working for nonprofit and being an executive director, being able to bring the arts into conversation and it not be a bookend, that I can advocate. I have a seat at the table and I can advocate for bringing artists in to help us understand urban planning, to help us process trauma, and then to advocate and funnel funds that come through into those spaces as well. So it is just giving me more tools and allowed me to open doors for other people. So that's the biggest thing it is created for me. I also think my kids seeing me make space for something that I'm proud of, and not just space for something that earns money and not just space for my paycheck, but this is my purpose. Poetry is me walking in my most authentic purpose, and I want them to walk in theirs too. And the best way I can encourage them to do that is to do it in mine. And so that is what it brings to my life, and I'm so grateful for it, and I hope to honor it with every opportunity I have.
And Charlene, does any of that ring true for you? How has it impacted your personal life?
Oh, absolutely. So much of what Leslie shared resonates with me and my experience, particularly the piece about purpose really resonates with me. And to be honest with y'all, I have a lot of things in my head, like a lot of stuff. Like I have more ideas. I have enough ideas for, I don't know, 5, 6, 10, 20 lifetimes. And I'm not going to be able to get them all done. And so writing for me is an exercise of getting all these things out of my mind and onto like another medium. And Unapologetic was my opportunity to move a lot of my thoughts, not all, because even there are things that have changed. Like there's some stuff that I think about differently from what I was in the book. But there, it gave me an opportunity to get those things on paper. And yeah, because and sometimes when I revisit or people like post quotes, I'm like, oh, I said that, like I wrote that. I don't really remember because it's been some years now at this point. And I don't know people who've written like 10 books. I don't know how they keep it all together. So where it's taken me is I mean, I think it's taken the ideas places that I didn't expect them to go. People all over the world have read this book, are thinking about it and figuring out what and how it applies to their lives. It has also, I mean, just unexpected places. Like I talked about who I wrote it for, like, because writing a book proposal, a nonfiction book proposal, oftentimes you have to do a whole section on who the audiences are. And so I have more audiences than that. But when I'm thinking about the things that I'm writing, I knew who I was writing to, who I had in mind. But a lot of different people read it. And then I'm like, wait, I literally talk about white women maybe 2 or 3 times in the whole text, maybe. And a lot of white women lesbian. I'm just like, wow, this is amazing, because I really wasn't thinking, I wasn't writing about y'all. And I think the other thing, it has taken me as a cultural worker to different places. So I'm working on a novel right now, because I'm thinking about what other ways do I want to be able to reach people? What other ways do I want to be able to do my political work? For the first time this past, like, what was it, back National Poetry Month last year. It's the first time I ever wrote poetry in my life. And so I started writing poetry last year, because the economy of words in poetry is very different from the other writing that I've always done. And so it's opened up, like I got all of that, or not all of it, I got a lot of it written down here. So now I can move to other creative projects that I have percolating in my mind. Like I'm interested in filmmaking. I'm interested in like other, like screenwriting. I'm a writer. That's what I am. I'm a writer. And I don't just write in one genre.
I'm glad you brought up the poem that, or the fact that you started writing poetry last year, because you have an Instagram post that when I read it, it reminded me of something Lesle said. And before we close out, I just want you all to talk about the similarities of this. So Charlene wrote on October 7th, 2020, she posted a poem. And this was the caption. It said, reading and talking a lot about categories, colonization, settlers, redemption, and recognition these days. This poem jumped out of my brain and onto a page in the middle of an article about African Native Americans. And then she goes on to explain further. And that reminded me of something I heard Lesle say, but I was like, how you just come up with these poems like so quick? Like the Meghan Markle, like the next day, it's just, she got a poem. And so I just thought that, you know, it's something there with you writers and poets, like the inspiration just hits you. And does the poem, or the specifically poetry, since you all both talked about poems just jumping out at you, like explain how that happens for you. Like what inspires certain poems, and how do you like process it and get it out in that instant?
So for me, I purposely try to write really quickly about something that's happening. And I write lots of stuff. I write love poems when I'm in love. I write when I cut your stuff off when we break up. I write about my children. I write stuff no one will ever see. I write about sex. I write about motherhood. Those poems get workshopped differently. But when I'm writing about current events, I want it to be with some immediacy. And I want to give people an opportunity to process what's happening, and tap into what they're feeling about it, and not what we're being told we should feel about it or how we're being led, but just to tap into what's exactly happening. And it's, I wish I could say it was me. I can call it the God in me. We can call it our ancestors. We can call it the Holy Spirit. We can call it, you know, it has lots of different names for what moves you to do what your purpose is. But I know, similar to when you start to listen to that little voice that guides you and tells you what's good and what's not good, don't date this person don't take the job.
That
Or when
little
you're
voice is
driving,
so smart about so much
turn down
stuff.
the alley, you know, keep going straight. Or that same voice, and I think the more you listen to it and respect it, the louder it gets, and the more clear you can hear it, and the more clear it can lead you when you're making decisions. That's the same voice that I write from. So when I hear her, I try to respect her time and what she's calling me to. So if that means I have to pull over, if that means I have to pull out my phone app, if that means I have to tell somebody, oh, give me 1 second, what you said just led to a thought. I respect her time because she doesn't have to bring it to me or out of me. And so that's where my writing comes from, but anything can spark it. And I'm grateful when the spark happens. And I try to be very, very intentional about giving it space. Like having an iPhone revolutionized how I wrote. I was definitely the college student who always had like the very nerdy, you know, journal and a pen everywhere I went because I was a writer, and if something happened, I was gonna have to write it down. So, you know, I was also very crunchy granola with like the broomstick skirt and not Birkenstocks because they're ugly. But you know, like I was like, you know, sandals, barefoot on stage, flower in my hair. I was very like stereotypical poet for a long time.
Yeah,
now
it's very
like
Freddie from Different World, very wavy.
I was listen, I went to Xavier thinking I wanted to be Whitley, and I came out of Xavier Freddie. And Freddie, before Freddie flicked her hair back, decided she was going to be an attorney. No, I'm still Freddie with Shazam. That is still who I am. On the inside of me, I'm still Freddie, dealing with all the stuff about being biracial and everything. Listen, I'll just riff a little bit.
Freddie was you.
In the 90s, I'm 44. In the 90s, it wasn't until the late 90s that being biracial was even on the US Census. Right. So I grew up with a lot of what are you, who are you? And, you know, you're not Black enough, you're not Mexican enough. And I was like, well, how can I not be enough of either? That's it's me. What are you talking about? There was no Halle Berry. There was no Barack Obama. There were no celebrities who were talking about having more than one immediate. Right. I mean, we're not going to unpack all the other stuff, but just immediate. So Freddie was my first. Like Different World made me go to an HBCU, and that is what defined me as a woman. And Freddie was the first person I saw on TV talking about it that wasn't running behind her dead mom like Imitation of Life. It was real life stuff. And I'm so grateful that the writing on that show, we haven't seen something that transformative for that particular age group in a long time, I think. And I'm so grateful for them for having that.
It sounds like Charlene might eventually, you know, write a TV show. She says she's not sticking to one genre. Before we open it up for the audience to ask some questions, I do want Charlene to just respond to your process. Like, you know, you made that post saying that it literally a poem hit you in the middle of an article. So is that normally how your writing speaks to you, just from anywhere, or, you know, what?
It varies, honestly. The poems, because of the way I started writing poetry, it was like mostly like a poem a day because of National Poetry Month. And I was like, what am I feeling that day? Like what's like literally like what am I physically feeling, and writing from that place. And when it comes to the novel that I'm working on, since I've started classes again, they talk to me a little less frequently, but my characters usually like start talking, or like they come up in my mind. And I more recently started to do audio voice messages. And so I don't have the time to write, to do my writing sessions like I had before classes started. So now I just do the dialogue and some of the some of the exposition like in my voice notes, so I don't lose it. But when it comes to the political writing, or like the nonfiction political writing or essays, sometimes they just come because somebody's asked me to write something, and they're like, oh, like the piece I wrote more recently, or published in December, on miscarriage that I had in 2020. Zora reached out. Thank you. Zora Mag reached out to me, an editor that I'd worked with before, and she was just like, you want to write something in December? You can write whatever you want to write. And I was like, okay, I guess this is what I'm gonna write about, because it's been to write about it. So I guess it's been almost, I'm gonna write about it. So sometimes things the opportunity is like, I'm invited to write, and then I think through what truths, or like what's the story that I feel like I need to tell. As I think it's what is her name? I'm forgetting. She's the woman who wrote The House on Mango Street.
Sandra Cisneros.
Yes, Sandra Cisneros. She says, what is the story that only you can tell? You need to go write that. And so I had her in my mind. I've had her in my mind since I read her saying that. And that was, at that time, that was a story only I could write. So that's why I wrote it. So my process looks different depending on what I'm writing about.
That makes sense. And so I won't be selfish any longer. I'm going to turn it over to Allie so we can get some questions from the audience before we do our little outro. And hopefully that will be Lesleigh reading one of her poems. So Allie, I'm turning it over to you, unless you want me to go through the chat.
So I do want to point out, I just mentioned in the chat, open things up for a few questions. You can use the raise hand feature to be called on, or type the question in the chat. I did see one question come up from Laura not too long ago that said, Charlene, you said you feel differently about some of the things you wrote in Unapologetic. Could you say what some of those things are, and what do you think now?
Briefly, it's not a Black, queer, feminist, anti-capitalism, anarchist, socialist mandate for abolitionist movements. Like, so I would have written a clearer analysis and a clearer story about capitalism, clearer analysis about the state, like literally the way, like having a state as we have it, and talking about governance more. So there's even like a point there when I talk about reforms versus revolution. I would have written that differently now, or I would write that differently now. I don't think I wrote anything that is like against my values. I just think my perspective has expanded since I wrote this, and that I think that's what's supposed to happen, for me. And I don't want to always be like stuck in the same way of thinking, or thinking that like where I am is where I'm ultimately going to be. I like to continue to grow in my understanding.
Also, that just gives you more room to expand on it in maybe a later book. So
yes, that's some of it. I'm thinking through it in my PhD program right now, and like what'll be that next project.
Beautiful. So I see Cynthia has their hand raised. Yep. All right. Cool.
Hello, I am unmuted. Hello.
And then Sean Reddy, I got you in the queue.
Yeah, thank you so much for your amazing voices and stories tonight. So thank you first. So I'm curious, during this last year in particular, with the triple pandemic, as you've named it, what has surprised you about your writing process, and what has that taught you about sort of what you think about you and as a writer, what it means to write, the purpose? So what surprised you?
I wasn't surprised. It's what I lean on to process. It's what I lean on to heal. It's what I lean on to think. It was like, hey boo, like this is some rough stuff. You ready? It was a relief to have something to help me just figure it all out. So like Charlene, I've lost friends and families to COVID. My 9 to 5, I'm the executive director for SEIU's Member Education and Training Center. So we represent roughly 90,000 home care and child care workers. And my team trains home care and child care workers here in the state of Illinois, who are mainly Brown and Black women. And so being a part of seeing, how organizers shape and change, and being able to bring my writing into that space as well and offer some peace and some love. Like, I was just happy to have her. I was just like, yes, come on. This is just something else, for us to add to why we do what we do. So grateful. I think I would have lost my mind. I'm a people person, touch a person, hug a person, love on you. Like, I would have lost my mind without writing this year.
Yeah, very similar to Leslie. Writing for me in the past year. I mean, it's also been a little weird because I'm back in the academy now and I'm trying to figure out what my writing voice is, because I can't, and I'm not going to write the way that a lot of these people talk in a lot of ways that these people
Thank
write.
God.
Because I'm like, that's not how I think, and that's not how I write. And I'm also there to grow, and to expand, not just my vocabulary, but expand my thinking. So I'm in a space of like, I'm writing a novel and I'm also writing like scholarly stuff. And what does that all mean? I don't know, to be completely honest with you. I'm trying to figure it out. I just know that I've been writing, I'm gonna continue to write. And it allows me to have a place to like process what's going on in my body and what's also going on in the outside world. So yeah, I'm figuring it out.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, great question. We're gonna jump to Sean next. Sean, are you there with us?
Is he frozen?
Hey everyone.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
It just, I wanted to just mention, well, one, it was really good to hear Cynthia's voice because we become social media friends and I haven't heard her before. So I was like, what? But also just like the idea of building community, Leslie and I go back years. I taught her kids as an elementary teacher. I taught Rhonda's kids, who's on here. Like, this whole idea of just feeling really inspired by all of you in the way that you talk about your art as artists, and then it also happens to be that you happen to be women, you happen to be women of color. And to me, this matters to me on some level as an educator, and also seeing that I'm the only male on here and I'm thinking about intersectionality and how do we create platforms where there's more exposure, because I feel like the work that all of you, like Leslie drives me crazy because I think she does amazing work all the time. And I've known her for years. And I'm so happy that she's seeing all this, but she's also this tough single mom of 3 kids. She's busting her ass. She's doing all this work. How do we promote this on a level where it's just, I don't know. I like everything that you guys are doing right now. It's how do we make this more inclusive, where it's about exposure? Like, how do we promote and build out?
I think platforms like this, I think the Silver Room is a great example. I mean, like, people who don't know the Silver Room or, where the Silver Room started would just think of it as a retail place, but it is grown into a platform to support artists at so many levels, and in so many different various ways. And You know, by coming here, you're supporting it. You know, it is a prime example in Chicago how not organically, intentionally, we find ways to lift each other up. And we just have to keep doing that and keep pivoting, even when it's heavy and exhausting and tired. But I think that's what brown and Black people do really well. We know ain't nobody gonna give a shit. We have to make it for each other. We have to make the places for each other, because that's the only way we get past the megaphone is when we make it.
I agree with everything you just said, Leslie. I really, like, for real, I'm not just saying that shit because we on this panel. I agree with everything you just said. And a couple other things I think that are important to say is that, like, Miriam Kaba is the first person I heard say that, you know, like, we should celebrate the choir. And what that means is, like, the people who show up, those are the people who's supposed to be here. Like, and like this, like, who is here today is more than enough. And like, and I also want to say we shouldn't assume that there are no other males on this call or any men's call. We actually don't know. There could be. There will be. You know, and all kinds of people. Like I imagine the same for Leslie's work, but all kinds of people read my stuff. Men, non-men, women, gender non-conforming folks, all kinds of people, white people of all races, backgrounds. And I've been very fortunate over the past 15 years or so to be able to connect with people around the world with these ideas and to learn other people's ideas. And it is, I'm not really concerned about exposure. I'm concerned about how we connect with other people and how other people, and not for other people to just take what I have written and agree with it all. But my role as an organizer is to partly, in addition to connecting and building a relationship, is to move, to agitate people, to move people, to have you think maybe a little differently, maybe ask yourself some different questions. Like, I work towards and am committed to living in a world where the prison industrial complex is abolished. And oftentimes when I talk about that, now it might be a little different, but when I first learned about it, I never heard about it like 7 years ago. I didn't even know it was a thing, but there have been people thinking about it long before I even knew about it. I still enter rooms with people like, what are you talking about? And so learning how to talk with people about that and have them leave the room thinking about something that they didn't necessarily think about before, that's my work. And that's it is like consistent work. And I don't even have the number of people who I've talked to about this stuff. And it's like in addition to me talking to a person, the amount of leaders that I've been involved in and helping to develop themselves as leaders and as organizers, as activists, as thinkers, and the amount of people who are poured into me. So it's exponential. It's so much bigger than even the people who are directly in the room at any given time, what our work has the capacity or the ability to do. And so I think your question is important, Sean. And I think that we should always ask, like, who's in the room and who's not, and never accept like face value as that's all, like what we can see or hear or feel as the only thing that is going on.
I appreciate that. That's good feedback.
Okay. I know we're going over on time. It's 8:02 currently. I have one more question. Is that okay with you all?
It's quarantine. Where are we going?
Well, yeah.
Listen, I don't know. Some of y'all are booked and busy, so I don't know what you got going on after this.
Leslie.
But I mean, I'm booked and busy from home. We are not in the streets right now. It is snowmageddon and pandemics.
Beautiful. So then I'm gonna give the floor to Denisha for a second, who has a question.
Actually, it's just a comment to Charlene. I'm Danisha. I live
Danisha, apologies.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say I think I saw you a couple of years ago at NWSA, and I'm just getting a chance to read your book. And I I work in diversity and inclusion, and I've been really conflicted about working in that field and learning about abolition and being like, yikes. So, and one of the things that I've really appreciated is your chapter 5 questions, because in the one about thinking about what your stakes are in the work. I think a lot of times working with students at a college, you're like, I'm doing this for the students and I'm, trying to move them ahead and all of this. And I really appreciated just being like, yeah, I have a stake in this as a Black woman, as a queer Black woman, to be in a university or a college that recognizes me. And so, yeah, I really love that. I teach or work in my social justice leadership class. And so I just really appreciated it. And I wanted to share that. And I was happy that we didn't have like this webinar set up. So I was like, oh, maybe I should just say something. So thank you so much. And I'm really great. Have a lot of gratitude for you and your work and really this space. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Yes, thank you so much. It's 8:05 right now. Someone is going to be dropping the links from one of our Silver Room accounts where you can purchase these 2 lovely ladies' books. That's another way you can increase exposure. If you've already read the book, buy it for a friend, share it with your circles, talk about this work because it's important work that deserves to be spoken about in many different circles, not just the circles that they are written for. So yeah, just keep uplifting these people and the amazing work that they do. Big shout out to Tanika Johnson for hosting this little combo. Charlene, you are incredible. It was a pleasure to meet you and to discuss this. Lesleigh, lovely to see you again. Such an honor all the time. Did we want to close out with like a quick little reading from either of you, both of you, and then we can close out, or just vibe check, see how you feel?
I'm always ready to read. Like,
all right, we can end with a quick little reading from each of you all. I love it.
I feel like I've been talking a lot. Charlene, you want to go first?
Oh, it always takes me longer. I don't have any short readings. I think it will take a while, like a couple minutes. So I don't know if y'all want me to do that or just have Leslie close it.
I'm looking at the comments and the people want it, so
we'll have Leslie go first and give Charlene some time to find it.
Okay.
Yes, that's what we'll do.
The piece I'm going to do is America, Come Get Your Children. I've been really blessed to get a lot of love from Brown Girl. And it has led to getting a literary agent, which I never thought would happen, and working on a children's book. I'm just like, did not think that would be the vehicle that I would ride into traditional publishing, but I'm so grateful for it. But that is just a tiny little piece of what I write. What I write the most of our pieces like America, Come Get Your Children. And I wrote it in 2017. And boy, did it just really become really apropos on June 6th. America, come get your children, the ones you are so proud of, the ones wearing stars and stripes, buying guns like candy, the ones dripping with white privilege that you created from red blood, from brown skin. America, come get your children. Come get your kids. The ones flying flags of defeat, of a history long dead, of a life they wish they had, of superiority they believe they have, the lies you whispered in their ears as you rocked them to sleep. Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. America, come get your children. The ones terrorizing this country, the ones terrorizing the world, the ones never called terrorists. Come get your rapist, your misogynistic, your appropriating, hating, bigoted offspring. You know, the apples that didn't fall far from the tree. America, come get your children. The ones running the country, the ones too cowardly to speak up, the ones that shoot into crowds and churches and light torches and run cars into peace. Come get your diseased infants. Entitled children in men's bodies, jealous girls screaming in women's voices, come get this disgusting basket of deplorables that you nurtured on manifest destiny. The pale pink faces in utter disbelief that even though you put your knee on every neck of every Black and brown neck you saw, we have fought back and risen, casting shadows on your children. And they rage when they learn that being a white, mediocre man is no longer enough. America, come get your children before they burn this stolen land down, and you with it.
Mm.
I'm going to read from the preface of Unapologetic. Unapologetic is an offering to our ancestors, my family, our movement, and the generations who will hold the struggle for Black liberation to come. I began writing this book over 5 years ago as a personal exploration of freedom, liberation, and movement building. Much like my life in general, where I landed in the book is both far away from and close to where I began. I was born and raised on the south side of Chicago to parents whose own parents migrated from the deep south. Their ways of talking, eating, and dealing with life still live in my body and in the choices I make. I left home at 18 and spent nearly 10 years exploring the United States and the world. As much as Chicago made me, the world has raised me. Whether my work took me to Murfreesboro, Tennessee, to door knock and gain support for comprehensive healthcare reform, or to Haiti to learn how to support nation building efforts, I learned that change was not only possible, it was inevitable. I also learned that the change needed for my people has only come because we insisted on it. Frederick Douglass famously observed that, quote, power concedes nothing without a demand, end quote. I believe that we must go further and say that power concedes nothing without an organized demand. Growing up in Chicago taught me about power even before I could define what it meant for my mother, my family, and myself as a little Black girl. My earliest memories about power come from the visits I took with my mother to the public aid office. I remember walking into a nondescript brown building on Root Street where we would enter a room full of Black and brown women. Most of the women had children with them, and like my mother, were there to secure food stamps or cash to support their families. The room was colorful and always noisy. We would walk up to the front desk, which was placed on high. And even then, the symbolism of this was evident to me. I found the arrangement uncomfortable and odd. I also didn't understand why we had to wait in a room all day for a conversation of no more than 15 minutes with a caseworker. I didn't understand why the caseworker asked my mother invasive questions about my very present father. I didn't know the government viewed Black fathers as a barrier to need and Black mothers as unworthy of dignified treatment. Those childhood visits to the welfare office with its fluorescent lights, along with experiences of growing up in back of the yards, Woodlawn, and Gage Park, stuck inside me as I began to learn about community organizing. But it was a visit to South Africa at the age of 18 that blew my mind and was a watershed moment. As a young Black woman from the racially segregated city of Chicago, I had little understanding of what apartheid meant in a global sense. But unlike the hours of documentaries I watched about the US civil rights and Black power movements as a child, that experience affected me viscerally and sparked my commitment to improving the conditions of oppressed people worldwide. Reflecting back in college, where I should have been exposed to books and materials about the Black radical tradition, I didn't have the language I now have to understand oppression based on race, class, and gender identity. I didn't have the words to explain why Black students had access to vastly different educational environments depending on their zip code. I surely did not understand why Blackness was most often talked about in the media as monolithic, why identities and experiences that most closely fit the dominant culture were praised, and why anyone on the margins of gender and sexuality was criminalized, degraded, or rendered invisible. Under the guidance of Dr. Venus Evans Winters, I read sociological texts that matched my personal experiences of racism, housing, segregation, and policing that helped bring global anti-Blackness, patriarchy, and capitalism into focus so I could fit the pieces together. History courses exposed me to the role of the, quote, race women, who at the turn of the century practiced Black activism in the South after the disenfranchisement of Black men. I was hooked on racial justice and started to understand the expansive nature of Blackness and what it meant worldwide. People in social justice movements taught me to think more expansively about Black freedom and collective liberation. Sitting at the feet of reproductive justice leaders, queer and transgender leaders and elders, and hearing their stories taught me what I didn't learn as a college student. Being in movement work taught me how to take information, put it into context, and produce my own knowledge to understand current conditions and to create a vision for the future. Movement work put the histories of Black feminist and LGBTQ movements on my radar. In political education sessions, I learned about anti-Blackness. Unapologetic is based on centuries of such information and context created by people committed to collective liberation. Black abolitionists, race women and men, nationalists, communists, socialists, feminists, theologians, and queer and transgender liberationists have built the foundation for what must be done today. Our movement taught me the value of study, rigorous thinking, and discipline to take action. Thanks to movement, I know what actions are necessary and why we must take action. The movement taught me that work for justice has always been done, and that my generation has a responsibility to carry the struggle for liberation forward. And the movement taught me the necessity of showing up for all oppressed people. I'll stop here.
That is a powerful opening. Like, I love the introduction to the rest of it.
Thank you.
I'm still fangirling.
Right? I just dropped some links in the chat, direct links to the amazing Instagram accounts of these powerful and very knowledgeable women. So feel free to follow them, keep up with their work, not just today or tomorrow, but keep up with them constantly. They blow my mind every day. So I hope that you all continue to do the amazing work. Yeah, just a lot of comments. We can leave the chat out for a little while because people are still reeling all of that in. And yes, quick shout out to the earrings that Lesleigh and Tanika got on.
I didn't get the memo.
We're gonna get
We gonna get you some. We gonna get you some. It's our girl.
Yes, Found Object is one of the vendors that you can shop and peruse at the Silver Room. They are available online, and she is a local dope woman of color owned jewelry line. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for everyone who is listening and participating in the conversation. This was a beautiful talk. I have a lot of takeaways from this, so I'm really excited to just sit because this is a very powerful room. Thank you again, everyone. I'm just reading these comments. Someone asked if this recording will be available somewhere else, and I am not the person who would know about that. There is a tech person here somewhere. Yes, the answer is yes. I don't know when, but it will be available to hear at a future date.
Perfect.
So,
You can always send me the file via WeTransfer.
There
you go.
Thank you, Charlene. It was an honor just to share space with you and listen to your brilliance. Just thank you for being such a badass. Tanika, my sister.
Oh,
I love seeing your star just shine so brightly. It makes all of us shine even brighter. Thank you to the Silver Room, and thank you to Eric Williams for being brave and making this space for us. We are so fucking grateful, man. Like,
yes,
extremely.
We are. Thank you all. And it was so nice to meet you virtually, Charlene.
Yes. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Leslie, thank you for reading. Tanika, thank you for guiding us through the conversation. Allie and everyone at the Silver Room for all your work. Y'all take all my money all the time. FYI. I've gotten a lot of my coins. Thank you. You'll get more.
For sure. For everyone else, their books, we have stock of them at the store. You can purchase it right now. Click on that little link down there, thesilverroom.com. But yeah, thank you all for coming and joining us today. Oh, I think we got a mama on here saying hi. Hi, mama. I love it.
That's probably my mama.
I love it.
My mom
All
in
right.
the chat. Okay, bye you all.
Bye. Have a good evening, everyone.
Stay warm.
Yes, stay warm, please, wherever you are in this country right now or in the world.
Look, everybody's leaving.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye,
I was gonna watch
everyone.
everybody sign off. Bye, friends.